His Mercury just goes straight all his life, no retrograde. And it's just going across the descendant up towards the midheaven. So really is relationships, responding to people, writing about therapy, psychology. See, really, just looking a little more closely here. I don't have a lot of dates put on this because I'm not doing much at 88, 89. The Mercury was going over his ascendant and his sun. Over his descendant and over conjunct the sun. So 89, he's only 14. So it's after with his dalliance with the fainting and learning about neurosis and then figuring out relationships. It's like his son, he's strongly affected by his parents, and the parents had their own Neptune-Sun relationship. The father was somewhat practical, but the mother was in and out of hospitals, and she was had visions, and they considered was kind of lost and a little crazy. But really, it's probably more. So he grew up with that in that environment with his parents watching that. So trying to make sense of that, trying to get some security of that. He started from that point. So how to work with that. You can always turn your turnaround to work with what you could do. So his Venus, looking at the Venus, and the Venus going straight forward the whole time too. It goes through over the descendant, up the same way as Mercury. So 7th, 8th house. Doesn't get into his 9th. 7th, 8th house, relationships and the responsibilities and exchanges within relationships. So 1897, when Venus was going over his Uranus, 75, 97, what do we have for 97? His father died in 96. So the Venus came and went over his Uranus shortly thereafter. So we had to start seeing things a little differently. Venus on it. So I'm not going to say that. I just want to see it's going. I was really looking for retrograde periods or big turning points, but it's not till. So he's past 1910. It went into Virgo. So it had been in the Leo phase with his sun and things, but 1910 it went into Virgo. There's some more criticalness about, more intellectual criticalness about what I'm thinking or what I want. I want to be appreciative for my ideas or thinking or analyzing things. This is just as he begins to start realizing I'm not fitting into this Freudian thing, or he's not. That criticalness became an undercurrent within this, but a strong undercurrent because it's Venus. Whoops. Okay, so let me look at this a little more closely. Okay. Okay, here we go. The Venus moves up, yeah, so there it was 1897. 1910 is just going into Virgo. And from 1910 was his analyzing. It's interesting, it's an I Ching hexagram called the deliverance of the abyss, getting out of the old negative things. And that criticalness was moving in that direction. Okay. We look at his progressed Mars. It starts in 11th house, it progresses. It goes through Sag, goes into Capricorn, into his 12th house, and never gets out of his 12th house in his life. Okay, so his Mars, that's the part of it we don't see too much because that's his personal style of going here, traveling or doing things, having adventures. And we don't see that much because we were conditioned to think of the therapist, but he had his adventures, but it went into by the time 1911, it went into Capricorn. So again, the Mars went into Capricorn. Instead of being ruled by Jupiter and traveling and going with Floyd to America and traveling around and expanding, it went into Capricorn. And there's a neat white. It's got the Saturn element came into it. And this was, again, part of the formative factors of him. I can't keep working like this. I have to work for myself. The Capricorn, and then as it went forward, there were challenges because it was moving more to the 12th house than the midheaven. So these were some of his challenges with the Mars. Okay, so I'm not going to stay on that long. I just wanted to, I like to just look at the Mercury, Venus, Mars, have a sense of where they are, if there's a retrograde or not retrograde, what's going on. So we're just in the phase 1912 where he's splitting up. So besides they were traveling together, by the time Mars went into Capricorn, Venus went into Virgo, the new moon, all these things triggered off this new style, this new direction. He was breaking with the old and having to be more serious and build up his work, start working on his own career, making his own friends. But really, he was also ostracized by a lot of the established friends who still supported Freud. I mean, Freud was an older man and well established. We'll deal with his chart tomorrow, but in the next session. Okay. Now we got there. We're looking back 10 years and forward 10 years for all the progressions. Like I said, you're not trying, when you're doing a chart, you're not trying to define someone, you're tuning into their matrix, you're tuning into seeing, observing what's happening, trying to make connections, see things, and from tuning in and looking at things and getting informed, other insights come out. Okay. I feel a big thing was the Venus element and how and the Sun in the 7th house with the square to Neptune for Jung. He established codependent relationships and he benefited by them. They would provide his security. He goes along, he got the security, he didn't necessarily do it himself. And then, but then it got too complicated, it couldn't. So like the wife wouldn't stand up to him so he could have affairs on other women while he was in the marriage. Well, that's security or control, depending how you look at it. I'm not sure the influence to the kids or whatever around that, but he became more famous. That was their dad. But at the same time, Freud didn't stand up to him, was putting him down for taking wrong positions or wrong positions. And it reminds me, like, there's a lot of martial arts stories where someone is almost dead and they go find a master and they learn from the master until they think they got the skills, they can take out the guy that did it to them. And the master says, no, you're not ready. No, you're ready. Wait. And they go and try and fight the guy back and they almost get killed again. They come begging back to the master and the master says, look, you weren't even listening. You know, so like there's a point here. You can argue both ways for whether Jung was going to this new understanding or he was avoiding or not fitting in or had guilt or complexes around the Freudian standards. So he couldn't accept them. But it's not that they weren't somewhat appropriate, especially for him in his chart with his Mars and Venus. Okay, 1902, some interesting things happen. Okay, Mercury squared his midheaven, the Sun squared the midheaven. They both squared the midheaven. 1902, that's as he's finishing getting his PhD. He gets the PhD. Mercury goes into Virgo, he gets his PhD. And by the time the Sun goes into Virgo to join it, well, the Moon will go forward. He got through that. He's still feeling insecure. The Moon hit Pluto. I think it was the progressed Moon hitting Pluto in May of 1903. Yes, he got married in 1903, probably in May, as the Moon conjuncted Pluto. He married the richest person. So it's not necessarily a marriage for love. Okay, then 1903, at the same time, shortly, just immediately after being married, or maybe at the same time, the progressed Moon went into Virgo, went from the Sun went into Virgo. So instead of being the proud Leo, he went into a more analytical person. The analytical side of relationships came in. The thinking side, bringing out the Mercury more. And the analysis more. And 2004, Venus was conjunct Pluto. This progressed Venus was conjuncting Pluto. He's confrontation around what he likes or what he doesn't like, what he wants. But even way before that, he had already started another relationship and brought it in. So it was already confronting questions of what love is or isn't under that. By 1905, Venus opposing Saturn, so he's still being depressed. But so this, by 1905, so he's been in the marriage, he's not loved in the marriage, he's having affairs, it's not working well, but he's got money, but he's not happy. Venus is opposed to Saturn, progressed Venus. And just after this, or during this, he writes, he's reading Freud's material, and then they meet in 2007. So he had a rough time. He wasn't feeling very good before he met Freud. So by meeting Freud in 2007, he really identified to being the student, being with him and aligning with him. He aligned with him, and Freud went into it, and Freud was identified to his protege. And so Freud had expectations which Jung supported, and it allowed Jung to belong and be supported and not have the same blank spot or unhappy spot that he had before that. Having the degree in the marriage was not enough. He had his ambition of wanting to get respect, but he wasn't going to get it from the marriage. So there's a different challenge here. By 2009, Venus is squaring his midheaven. He's still not exact. He's got vision. He's still questioning his values around it. This is the end of their traveling period. And by the time Venus went into Virgo, 2010, beginning of 2010, that's the beginning of the critical phase. I'm not just getting critical about what I want, what I don't want, what I like, what I don't like. And that's the seeds of beginning to build up to the new moon phase, to ending the relationships, Freud realizing he doesn't fit in there. And then in 2011, Mars has gone into Capricorn. By 2012, Venus goes into, Moon goes into Libra. Let's just see. Yeah, and that's about as far as I took it. By 2014, his progressed moon went into Scorpio. As he's in the internment camp, running the internment camp, his progressed moon was in Scorpio, and Neptune, and his progressed moon was opposing Neptune. So he was seeing a lot of pathetic things that probably way worse than he'd ever experienced in his own life. And yet he was the one in charge of it and trying to direct these things. So this, I mean, probably a movie could be made just at that time if there was enough information. Hard to say. It's a difficult time, confusing time. And then by 1916, Mercury went into the 8th house. And shortly thereafter, he was writing the three, what was it? He wrote the book to the, where are we here? 7 Sermons to the Dead, yeah. So 1970. So after Mercury goes into the 8th house, within a year, and Jupiter goes into Scorpio, but this is his writing and publishing the 7 Sermons to the Dead, which I haven't read, so I can't play with that too much. Okay, so now that was the progrestinatal. This is a progressed and progress, which really was just showing the new moons, but it does sometimes show other bigger aspects. This is Venus opposed Saturn in 2003. So this was his unhappiness. So it had to be romantic unhappiness too, or discontent. And it's opposing Saturn, which is his identity. It's identified as Saturn. His career is not getting the respect of what he had. This is all, he got his degree, he's married, but he's got money, but he's not getting the respect. So he aligned with Freud. So his alignment with Freud came from an inhibition and discontent. And as it got better, he rode with it. By 1904, the Venus hit Pluto, and he realized he wasn't happy at all. It was like nothing was working at all. So that's Venus squaring to Pluto. Okay, so then he wasn't happy. So it was after that, after those harsh times, that there's no other big aspects coming in, that he met Freud. When he met Freud, he aligned with him, and by the progressed moon going over Uranus when he was traveling. So they had their adventures. It was really fresh air compared to where he was beforehand. But he still was riding on Freud's coattails, and to do that, Freud was thinking he was more there than was getting independency and expecting him to be a certain way, and he wasn't going to be that way. So there was conflict within that, confusions within that. Okay, now. We're doing time. Okay, we're going to be another 20 minutes anyways.